5 sales professionals talk all things sales. From cold calls to closing, we cover it all. This week, we have a special guest joining us, Bob Usselman, a regional sales manager for Solventum in their medical surgical division. Thank you for joining us today, Bob.
Happy to be here, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. So we are going to dive today into closing and how to close with confidence. But before we jump into the topic, we would love if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey thus far.
Yeah, so I'll do that quickly because that'll hopefully be the most boring part of the content we have today. So yeah, my name is Bob Usselman. I live in the Twin Cities. I'm a regional sales manager for Solventum, which is about a 25,000 employee company that spun off from 3M. For those of you who haven't heard of Solventum, it's a very new company spinning off from a larger company. So yeah, I've been with 3M for 19 years in industrial sales, marketing, and then for the last 10 years, I've been in sales management, first in industrial and now in healthcare. And before that, I was a sports writer, a high school English teacher, and a college soccer coach.
Wow, I didn't know that all about you.
I'm married with 3 kids and 1 dog.
Okay, now we got your whole life story. I've known Bob for, we're going on, I think 2 years now, when you used to help, or you probably still help with the sales classes that I was a part of. And I did not know that you were a teacher and a coach and all of that stuff. That's cool. So closing
can be one of the topic that Bob picked for us for tonight, by the way.
It is.
Closing with confidence is kind of fun. It had my mind spinning over the last day or two as I was kind of thinking about our conversation tonight. So I'm looking forward to it.
So the first kind of question I want to pose to the group. When I think of closing, especially as a new professional, I think of how awkward it can be and how do you get from presenting and having them agree that the product or the service is great to asking them for money. So how do we get over the awkward closing hurdle?
The first question I'd to kind of dissect that is, why do we feel awkward?
Yeah.
And to me, it would only feel awkward if I hadn't done the proper steps up front, right? Like I can close with confidence if I've built the right relationship, if I've built trust, and if I've done a great job of discovery where I really understand the customer, because then I can be confident. But if I don't have that understanding, or I don't have a good enough relationship where I feel like I've gotten the right information and real transparency, then I would be then I'd have a total lack of confidence because I don't have enough information. So to me, that's I suppose the answer to your question is to me, closing is about all the steps beforehand. Yeah.
I love that.
Again, took all the good content away from you guys. So let's see what you got.
It's a very short. It's a very short podcast tonight, Abby. Thanks for stopping by.
I was just saying, I think there's a negative connotation with the closing thing, and that's why there's a little bit of an uncomfortable, like we think we're gonna go close somebody, and I don't know that I've ever gone in and closed a deal. I've made an offer, I've presented well, I've done all the discovery to Eric's point leading up, and then I've given people the opportunity to buy, and that's really
I like that.
when you're coming up to the end. I think there's this weird thing now. You should be wrapping things up. You should be presenting. You should be asking for the sale. But the whole I'm going to go in and close this person. I don't want to be treated that way. I don't think probably anyone really wants to be a victim of being closed. But you do want things laid out well for you. And when you come in with confidence on the solutions that you have and the things that you're proposing, I think that's the confidence part. I'm presenting a solution that I know is going to provide value to you. I'm making an offer that I know you'll be lucky if you take it. I can feel good about the conversation we're having because I believe in what I'm doing. And that's why I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
To talk about the awkwardness, because I'm often awkward, is like when I first started in sales, I sucked at it. So it was kind of awkward because I didn't have any confidence. Same thing when my son was studying for a test. He's like, I'm going to bomb the social studies test because I don't know where the 50 states are. And I'm like, well, yeah, sounds like you got to do some work, right? And the work isn't standing in front of a mirror saying, I think I'll know the 50 states. I'm good enough and darn people like me. Because that's how sales started for me, right? Like, you'd be good at sales. That's a great start, right? When someone says you enjoy communicating with people. Good start. You don't hate rejection. Great start. But you're still going to suck because when you hear it for the first time, like the first time I was slinging cell phones and they said I have to go talk to my wife, I was like, well, that's logical. And then they left. And by the fifth time they did that, I wasn't closing the sale. I'm like, I should really think of a new line at this point, right? Like, and maybe try to find out, like, hey, what would your wife say? And then they start talking more, and I find more pain, and I get more information. And then I just kept elevating, getting better, right? And what did that build?
Confidence.
Oh, hey, Bob, like we didn't skip a beat, right? Like we've been planning this all week. Confidence, because you build confidence. Without evidence, it's delusion. And we've had it so long that we could just be great without working at it. Put the reps in, do the work. And so if you're new at sales, you say, well, how the heck do I do that, Neil? Take the best salesperson at your job and triple what he's doing right now because you need more reps. You need to get better faster. And then, yes, listen to the sales podcast and we'll give you some other ideas because you nailed it, Eric. If you're not doing discovery great and you're not doing all the things, like even the number one thing, just qualify the person. Maybe they're not ready for your product. That's easy enough because I wouldn't want to close something that's not qualified. But build that confidence. We so often just have fake confidence because it's the fake it before you make it. And I much prefer walk it before you talk it.
I like that.
Someone smarter than me said it.
I need to be very empathetic because every sales job I've had is B2B long sales cycle,
Right.
And so there are some sales jobs where I wouldn't be qualified. I could speculate and maybe I'd be good at it, but I think it all comes to priority alignment, and that, you guys have all spoken about laying the foundation, right away. And we've all heard stories where an ambitious, well-trained young sales professional goes in and they drop their pitch and they find out, towards the end that the customer can't even if they wanted to buy, they can't use your product because you didn't ask the question at the beginning. Now you just wasted a half hour of your time. You could have been someplace else. So priority alignment is the key right from the get-go so that you know that, hey, can my product and service get them what they need? But, some of these sales professionals, I never did door-to-door. I've never done retail. And I've never done you go in quick and you have to close that day. So I have to disqualify myself from that type of environment because I think that's a different animal. There are some sales models where that's what you do. And there's people who are really good at it. I've always had the benefit to build long-term relationships and really understand their priorities so that we can, guide them to where it is. And what I found, Anna, you kind of talked about it earlier about sort of it just becomes like the eventuality of the process where they would be grateful to buy your product or your service, where it's almost like you walk your customer through the process as opposed to having some snappy closing technique, right? And so what I've said when I was in sales, it's been a while, but I spent 8 years carrying the bag, and oftentimes I would tell customers towards the end of the sales process is, okay, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, normally what we do now is X, and that was my close. It wasn't anything snappy, but that was the culmination of weeks and months of value demonstration and priority alignment and understanding why they would move forward with us. And so to me, it's all about laying that foundation first. And I think we've all sort of touched on that kind of general concept.
Abby's heard me compare this. And so I'll throw a question out to, well, I was going to say Grant, Neil, and Bob, but Anna, you could have done this too. The five of us are married, right? When did you ask your spouse to marry you? How did you know that you should? Anybody want to throw an answer out there? I know this is weird.
No, it's not. I'll just tell you, but maybe I'm a coward, but I already knew, and so, and I think maybe that's where you're going.
Yes.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, in sales, we have things called buying signals, right? When the customer makes a super positive comment or that they love that feature or that it's going to solve a problem, and sometimes they're nonverbal. You can just see excitement and interest. Sometimes it's verbalized. But marriage has a lot of similarities to sales. And there's usually buying signals in a relationship too. You've talked about how many kids do you want to have, where do you want to live, you've thought about your future together. Every one of those is like, yep, getting pretty close. You don't just go on a first date and be like, hey, I think I'm going to propose to this person and see what happens. You go into it pretty much expecting or having a pretty high degree of confidence that the answer is going to be yes. And that's closing. I mean, that's where you should be at in sales too, is you've done the work up front. There's been the signs and closing, to Anna's point, it's kind of easy at that point. Matter of fact, you almost don't have to, because it kind of, it just moves forward.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it till you guys start talking about it more, right? Like best sale of my life, definitely my wife, right? Up under my coverage. Yep, good salesperson. That's how people knew. But the reason why was priority alignment. And it sounds so like, but it was like, wow, she's into her health and I'm into my health. Wow, she thinks this is about money. She thinks about this religion. We aligned. Yeah. That makes things a lot easier to close at that point.
Well, and the clearest buying signal, Neil, is when you go look at rings together. You're like, oh man. Hint.
Strong buying signal.
I would just I would add,
Grant, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that everybody was talking about, I would totally agree with. I would pivot or ask maybe a follow-up question. How about when you find yourself in a position that you're maybe selling past the close, where, hey, we do think it needs to be this long process. Oh, we've answered these questions or we've done the demos, but there's more. I want to do more. I want to show you more. What happens if the customer is just ready to buy? I'd be curious if, you guys have thoughts or anything around, like, what happens if you find yourself selling past the close in a lot of scenarios?
That's tricky.
We've seen it. And I think when you get into sales leadership and your job is to travel around with people on your team and work with them, you kind of have that joke of shut up and take the order, man, and so that's important. And I think a lot of times it comes from ambition, and I can relate to this a little bit. Maybe when I was a newer rep, you're so proud of the training you've got. You want to show you belong. You've got this ambition, and it comes from a good place. But you go through the process, and you're not reading your customer, and you're so in line with, the features and advantages and benefits that you haven't got done talking about yet. And that's the nuance. And you feel like it's almost like you feel like you haven't done your job yet completely because I didn't tell them about the third feature that they really are going to care about, and I need to just stop and take the order. But the other thing, it also begs a different question, Grant. Sometimes you want to slow the buying process down. Sometimes you'll get a customer who's ready to buy, and that doesn't always mean we want to sell it to them right then. I mean, what if they're buying prematurely and somebody else in their organization 2 weeks later is going to discriminate why they made that decision? And because they purchased too quickly, maybe I don't retain their business long-term because they can't defend it in their own building, right? And so it's a little different than selling beyond the close, but sometimes your customer is ready to buy too quickly. And you have to, you can use humor with it. You can relate. Hey, I'm really happy that you like our product, and I'd be happy to, take your signature today. We don't take signatures, I guess, but you know what I mean. I'd be happy to, accept your order today. But really, I want to make sure that we have a full evaluation so that if you do get called on the carpet on this, you know why you've moved forward with it. And the adage also is if they buy too quickly and too easily from you, they'll switch too quickly and too easily to your competition as well. And so it's sort of nuanced to what your question was, but there's that balance between shut up and take the order, but sometimes slowing it down as well.
I am chomping at the bit to tell you guys a story of one of my biggest sales failures ever, but it goes right to your question, Grant. So when we started my former company, and we were a Microsoft Dynamics partner, so we sold CRM and ERP software basically, right? And I don't remember exactly, but I mean, it was the first year. So we were small, not really knowing what we're supposed to be doing, probably not great at the sales piece. And one day the phone rang, and it was a relatively big company in Fargo. And they're like, do you sell CRM? Microsoft CRM? And yeah. Okay, we want to order it. And I'm like, this is like the greatest thing ever, right? Literally, I think we went out to the bar that night and celebrated because somebody literally just called and said, yeah, we want to buy 20 users of Microsoft and, Microsoft CRM. And oh my God, we should have slowed down because the customer really we should have forced them to do some due diligence because we thought it was the greatest thing ever. We got the check, we bought them the software, and then it blew up in our face to an insane degree because now all of a sudden they started asking the questions. Oh, you mean this needs SQL Server? Well, yeah, it needs SQL Server. Oh, you mean it doesn't do this, and we need to customize it to do this? Yep. And we looked like complete idiots because we took the easy sale by somebody who thought they were just they were a Microsoft shop. We were going to go down this path. Boom, they make the transaction. They make a whole bunch of wrong assumptions, and we didn't force them to answer those questions and do that due diligence. And I mean, it was horrible. And it's hard to slow down a deal, especially when you were that small company in a startup, and it's like, wow, this is so, you're just so excited. But sometimes the right answer is to slow the customer down and force them to answer those questions and make sure that it's not going to blow up at you down the road.
I think it's interesting, Bob, you said ambition driving that. I think sometimes it's enthusiasm. Like, you're just so excited about what you're doing and what you have, and it's the greatest solution ever. And to Eric's point, it's so easy sometimes to put people into the wrong solution because all of the gotchas and maybe they don't. But there is that fine line too, because sometimes you just want to buy. I don't need to be sold anymore. I know what I need. I know the features. And so maybe there's a handoff in there that's graceful in that, hey, I want to make sure you get the training and deployment resources too, because I can tell you that I do what my seller's selling, because that's where you're going to be successful and we're going to be successful. And so being able to walk away and still be that resource, take the sale when you know that it's a good fit, when you know it's the right thing for them, but making sure they have the deployment resources. In technology, it's very common for people to have amazing tools that they don't know how to use. So I think that there's also this hurt feeling when you're one of the people that has a robust solution that can do a lot, to walk away before you enable people the way that you want them to be enabled. And so trying to figure out where's your lane to make sure they get the right product and they know what to do, and then have the enablement potentially after you help them get started is really important.
Eric, since you brought up dating or marriage early, I have an older sister, and when I was in high school, kind of starting to get into girls for the first time, she told me that the most attractive thing a guy can do is take it slow. Yes, you want orders, you want to drive revenue for your company, you have a quota to hit, enthusiasm, well said, Anna, no question about it. You want to be good at your job. But in most cases, and there are exceptions, again, where you have to shut up and take the order, but in most cases, you actually make yourself more attractive of a long-term partner if you are willing to take it slow. Because again, you're very seldom going to run into buyer's remorse if you've helped your customer walk through the buying process in a thorough fashion, and they're going to value that, because there's just like in the dating scene, there's a bunch of dudes who don't want to go slow with my older sister. You know what I mean? And so it's the same idea. There's a bunch of sales reps out there who want to just take that order and leave and go on to the next customer. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's why a lot of our customers do have that reticence to move forward sometimes. It's almost like refreshing and attractive when somebody's willing to take it a little bit slower to invest in that customer. But again, I've never had the must close today sales job. I'm sure there's different perspectives there that I just can't speak to.
I think the important thing is that you're going on the schedule of the person that's buying, and then the extra value you if somebody's trying to go too fast is saying, hey, I want to make sure I'm getting you in the right solution, but trying to keep up on the schedule of the buyer and not your own. And I think that's where we get in trouble as sellers sometimes, is we're more on our own schedule. If they want to go fast, you want to go fast too, but you want to make sure they get the right thing. If they want to go slow, now, I don't know about your sister, fast, slow, Bob, that's up to her. But it's the same thing in the dating realm, I'll tell you guys.
Yeah.
Pay attention to who you're courting.
I think the biggest thing you're building there is the trust, right? Because that's what you're getting in dating and with the customer at that point, is when you can stop and say, hey, totally love that you want to buy now, but you pull it back. That is going to gain ultimate trust. And don't take this as like, I'm going to manipulate people now and do this, right? Because again, sales can be evil, but doing the right thing is always the right thing. And no matter what we do it inside of. And so that just brings so much trust when you can just say, hey, you know what? This isn't the right solution for you guys. And they're just going to want you so much more at that point, right? They're like, is there anything else you sell? Is there anything else you do that I can buy from you guys? Because you disqualifying yourself from it, that's that's the ultimate trust there at that point. And that's what you're doing when you're saying, hey, I want to make sure we're in line here. And I really like that, Bob, because I think I've gone through some stuff that's like more fast every day, and then now getting into B2B. I think there's a little bit of that old, like coffees for closers still in me, right? Like there's still a little bit of that there that, he still pops his head out once in a while. And I think, like I said, it just makes more sense in the longer sales cycle to have that trust and rapport.
Yeah, it's the in sales we spend so much time talking about a sales process, but there's also a buying process, and they don't always fit together nicely. And there's times that buying process is going to skip steps, and from a sales process perspective, we need to step in and say, whoa, we need to answer some questions to make sure this is a good fit. And then there's times we should ignore our sales process and focus more on the buying process. It's not a clear path as to how to navigate that, but taking the time to do it right is important.
Say, Abby, do you mind if I ask a question sort of related
Go
to
for
this?
it. Yeah, I'd love that.
So Anna, you just sparked some curiosity here, because you do want to be on the buyer's schedule, and that timeline. So I think that that's oftentimes the right thing to do. But you made me think about something. You've done all the work. You've aligned your priorities. You understand what they want. You've gone through the evaluation process. You've earned the order, right? You feel good about that. But then the customer's process, maybe you have a hyper analytical and they're going real slow, and so when the customer's buying process and their timeline is too slow, where does that take us? Because I can ask for the order. I can have that tough conversation of, hey, I think we're here. But that's an interesting balance, because they're not, we've done everything, but maybe their buying signals aren't quite as robust as we'd like them to be, even though we think we've answered all the needs.
I actually have a thought on that, because my buying process is extremely slow, as cities and government tend to move extremely slow. So they often can't. You could get the fire chief that I'm working with all the information in a week that he needs, and he could talk to his department and they could be sold on it, but it could just take so long to get approval. And so what my manager and I have talked about doing is, he calls it the drip drip, where you just slowly drip on them. So even it's like microscopic selling, I guess. You've already sold them on the product. They already built that trust. They know that we can build what they want and we could get them what they need. But you have a customer come in for a delivery and they're taking home the truck that is similar to the one you're selling. You just take a picture and send it to them. Hey, this truck's going home today. Reminded me of you guys. I thought that you might want to see it. Looking forward to hearing how the next meeting went. Or you send them an update on the company's new product, or whatever it might be. You just slowly drip on them to just remind them that you're there and that you're ready when they are.
I like that.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
I saw a lot of nodding heads.
I've used the word trickle oftentimes. You said drip drip, same concept. So that's very powerful when you can.
I would say another thing that I think of in that scenario, because it can be difficult as a sales rep, especially when you're trying to, forecast closing opportunities, and your business obviously reports on a financial calendar that you're trying to work with. If you have the ability to, continue to just build pipeline, prospect other opportunities, that's kind of the cyclical nature of sales is kind of a carousel that you're on, right? Of, hey, yes, you're always working to close deals. But I think even in those times when you're probably riding the highs of, hey, I'm excited, we got good signals here, that's really a perfect opportunity to go back into the trenches and figure out who's going to be the next buyer, where I can start this whole process over again. Because to your point that we've been talking about, all of a sudden, if we're ready to go and, here's the proposal, and it's screech, we come to a halt. Now this gets to be a little bit awkward, right? Of okay, what am I doing? Are we going to close this? Are we not? Hey, you know what? When you guys are ready, your point, Abby, we're here. Yep. I'll continue to make myself available. I'm sending you notes, I'm on LinkedIn, you're looking at me, like I'm still top of mind, but hey, hopefully there's other customers that I can continue to be helping in the meantime, right?
I'm so glad you said that, Grant, because I was thinking that, there are things you can't control if somebody has a slow buying cycle, if they have budget, if their stuff's falling. There's things you cannot control, but what can you control? You can increase your opportunities. So understanding the buying side. The worst thing I see is when people don't accept the reality of the situation. Remaining a constant resource is wonderful. If somebody doesn't have the resources or it's not their timeline, be respectful, show up in a respectful way, checking in, trickle effect, but keep broadening your opportunity by reaching out to other people and using your time wisely, because that's all you can do.
I just give a bigger discount. Uh-huh.
Don't do that.
No, but that's what I'm saying. But that's what people are doing wrong. And someone right now is like, well, that's what we do. That's the FOMO at this point, right? We want them to move quicker. And again, like, stop it. No, that doesn't work. That isn't the way to go with this. It's what you guys are talking about. I love the trickle effect because I always say the same thing. If you're not first, you're last, right? It's Ricky Bobby. If you're not first in the customer's mind, you're last. And it's all timing. It's on their time, and finally they get mad enough or the problem's big enough or they want to make the change, and you just have to be in front enough of value that they say, oh yeah, today's the day we're going to make this shift. But is there a way to speed it up, I think, is the question, right? What are some ways we can maybe speed this up and make sure that this buying cycle doesn't get away from us? Because there are ways of maybe getting an upfront contract. Hey guys, at the end of this, these are the next steps I'd like to do, and if we're not interested, you're still going to get a Christmas card from me because I don't care. Right. But at the end of this, can we take this next step? Does that make sense? Like, at least we're being proactive and maybe we're upfront making this the next step. So we both agreed upon it at that point. You're busy. I'm busy. I don't want to be trickling in on you, but can we make this the next step? If you know but you got to know what that next step is for them.
Well, and,
right?
and
So
Neil, I laughed when you said give a discount, but sometimes that's forced into the situation. And I'm betting you're in the same boat that I was when I was a Microsoft partner. There's times where, okay, we know the end of June is Microsoft, fiscal year end. If there's promotions and incentives, they're usually tied to the end of a quarter. And yeah. Lots of, especially publicly traded companies, are going to do that to drive sales, to fit those, to hit their quarterly goals or their year end goals. So sometimes those discounts aren't even necessarily totally our decision to bring into it because we're a reseller of a product, and there's promotions in the marketplace, and if we don't sell it and utilize that promotion, our competitors are going to. So I mean, to some degree, sometimes you have to do that, even though I hate the idea of trying to use a discount to drive a timeline. Sometimes that actually is kind of forced into the equation.
I hate discounting for the close, but you are right. Like, there's a value in us presenting discounting when we have the opportunity, and it would be a disservice for us not to present it. But I hate it. I always think, like, is your product worth more right now than it will be tomorrow or less? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me how the first of the month changes the value of a solution that we're selling. Yes. But as a reseller, it's also my responsibility to try and get the best possible deal for the person I'm working with. So it is an unnatural pressure cooker feeling to be going back and forth in that environment. I hate it.
So I'm going to pull us back a little bit back to this, closing with confidence topic. On our second episode, Bob, we covered like all the bad advice there is in the world about being a salesperson. We probably only scratched the surface, actually. But, one that pops into mind, I don't remember if we talked about it that night or not, but a saying you've probably all heard is, always be closing, right? There's a super aggressive approach. And of course, that I doubt I'm confident all of us generally think that's a bad idea. But the sliver that's kind of that you can pull out of that might be okay is always be trial closing. We talk about the trial close in a lot of our sales classes. When you're presenting a great feature of your product and you get to the end of that little piece of the presentation, you just ask a simple question, right? So what do you think of that? Or how would that work for you? And what you're pulling out with the trial close is the buying signals, or what you're hoping to pull out from the trial close is the buying signals we were talking about a few minutes ago. And so I don't agree with that saying, but if you change it to sort of, trial close in terms of trying to just constantly be gauging where the customer's at, I kind of, I think that's something that can give us confidence. We already talked about buying signals, but we haven't talked about how do we pull those out? How do we encourage them? And I think, if there's any other tips along those lines, because that goes back to giving us confidence as to where we're at.
One of the things that we talk about in a long sales cycle business, like selling a fire truck, or selling a medical device or whatever it might be, there's a lot of wins. How do you define wins? How do you define a close? And so for us, the first little win might be, hey, I got the right contact. Now I know who to talk to. Now I know who to sell to, right? Hey, I got that first appointment. Hey, I got that first demonstration. Those are all little wins that might lead into an actual revenue generating win 2 years later, and so in a long sales cycle, if you're looking at only the revenue as the only way we can close, it'll be tough. I did want to circle back, and I don't want to get us back off track, Eric, but Abby, when you talked about like leaving the fire chief, and similar on these lines, like when you start talking about the little wins, so you've done all the legwork, the fire chief and his crew and the municipality, they want to buy, but they can't because of budget or whatever reason, or different distractions in their life. I think what I see a lot of sales professionals do at that point is they kind of stop, and then they put the next action in the hands of the customer, and they leave that opportunity and say, hey, Fire Marshal Fred, just call us when you're ready, and that's it, period, and they go away. And really what you should be doing is, hey, Fire Marshal Fred, I understand you've got some things you're working through. Hopefully you've identified what the reasons for the delays are, and you've asked him or her those questions. But once you identify those, you can say, hey, I understand you got to go through that. I'm going to follow up with you in about a week to 10 days. Is that okay? So now you're not nagging the customer when you call back and say, hey, it's still me. I'm still here. I still want you to buy this truck. Now you're just keeping your promises. Now you're just building trust and integrity because I made a commitment to you, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, and I'm just following up now. And so that might be the little win as well. You know what I mean? So you have that trial close. You got, that little win at the end. I've done all my work. I'm going to stop selling, but now my win is to get this reason why I'm going to follow up, this reason why I have to be, relevant to that customer, in front of that customer. So I think it's an interesting concept at introduction, and then even post value demonstration. We know that we've done our work, but we haven't gotten the order yet. How do you continue to close gradually along those ways, along that path?
Absolutely. I think that yeah, just as long as you can kind of get the information from them on what they're struggling with, because it could be personal. Like they could just be the holidays and it's busy and they don't have 7 Christmases to go to, so they can't make a decision right now. And then it's like, great, I will circle back with you mid-January. Well, everything has settled down. The last question that I wanted to pose to the group, Eric already shared one, but do you guys have a worst close story? Something that you laugh about now, that you look back on your career and think, wow, that was not great?
I'll do an early blunder in the cell phone days again. Like I said, that was the first retail experience slinging cell phones. And I always, things would keep me up at night if the customer didn't sell. I always wanted to think about the process, what I could do better. And we had one gal came in and she just said, hey, I'm going to go talk to my husband and then we're going to come back. And I just felt from her body language that she wasn't, because she was with a different carrier. And I'm like, no, you're not. I went with like the straight, like, no, you're not, like to almost like bait her and be like, yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm coming back. And she's like, well, no, I'm not. And she's just like, yeah, she was gone. I'm like, well, I'm not going to try that one again. No, I'm never going to try that again. That was really stupid. That was really dumb. So yeah, didn't work. So I scratched that one off my close. So
I think it's funny you say that, because I use humor when I get nervous too. And so there's been multiple times in my career where I've tried to lighten the load with a quick joke or something, and then there's just deadpan silence, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sneak backwards out the door now and hope that nobody says anything. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, man.
Mine's not nearly as funny, but it was a learning process. It was in my industrial sales days, and I was in a large foundry, and I went through and had a great demonstration. We tested the product, documented all the value, did our pencil sell, and everything was ready to go. And the customer asked what the price was, and I didn't know. And that's just again, it's just you can't close unless you're prepared with all the detail. And I was a young rep at the time, and I'd done everything, but I was not able to sell the product because I didn't know the price. Now, we sold through distribution, so we didn't always get that question, but you should be prepared for all those little details. Hey, so I want to buy now. Now you should be able to tell your customer how to buy. And part of that in my case was price, and I didn't have it. So that was just a big miss on my part.
Yeah, and we keep talking about closing the deal in kind of the positive sense of the win, but there's times you go to close and you lose the deal too, right? Like nobody bats 1,000. So, I mean, I think I could probably come up with a lot of stories and of deals that have blown up on me over the years.
I did work with a distributor rep once who he made the comment to me, well, I'm not going to get the business anyway, so I'm going to go with the scorch the earth policy. And he didn't get the business, and I was standing next to him, and he was a total jerk to the customer, basically just like ripped the customer for not buying and, all this just ridiculous, deplorable stuff. The concept of losing gracefully was foreign to this dude. And it was just the worst, end of a sales interaction that I've probably ever seen, because, hopefully when we lose, especially in a longer sales cycle business, I might lose today, but I might have something different to sell in 3 months. And so he did scorch the earth, and he was out of that account forever, unfortunately, And so that was an ugly situation.
I think if there's like anything that I've learned, and I've made a lot of mistakes, you start thinking about like the things that you've done wrong in your career, but those are the most valuable learning lessons. And I think the things that I've learned, the two biggest things are always be honest. So like, if you don't know the answer that time, you don't know, just, I am so embarrassed, but I really, really don't know. And always be graceful and treat people well. I've been, even when you're in team selling, occasionally you're with a manufacturer rep or somebody that's really aggressive in their approach. And that's a very uncomfortable situation, but just always like remaining kind and nice. Even if somebody's being aggressive with you, it's really hard to be aggressive and mean to somebody when you're being kind. And sometimes you get the buyer that's judgmental and worried and scared and trying to put yourself in their shoes and just even be respectful and kind, even if they're being aggressive back. Always be nice and always be honest. Yeah, it's kind of the same things we learned in kindergarten. It still comes all the way through. So what do you think, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, I've just been thinking, about different things, and honestly, like I really haven't had any major horror stories that I can think of, but I think the part, and I really like turn this on myself, is the worst scenarios that I get like the most frustrated about is if I make the same mistake like over, meaning I didn't learn from the previous opportunities, right? And whether it was, hey, maybe I didn't do as in-depth discovery as I should have, or maybe I really didn't understand the customer's, buying process and the timeline of like, when can they buy stuff? How do they buy stuff? I think, I probably am, I shouldn't say too optimistic, but I'm always like, excited about, hey, this is what we can do, and this is the problems we can solve. And I think, in the times where I've lost and I reflect and, you don't get a close. And if I really am honest with myself and it's like, man, there's things that I just didn't do that I know I should have done. Those are the hardest for me, is because, again, I'm all about learning, and hey, I want to learn. Obviously going to fail a ton. We all are, right? And hey, like, this is an at-bat type of career where you just got to get back up to the plate and try again. But the times where I'm, the most frustrated is when it's like, oh, made that mistake again, didn't adjust, didn't change like I should have.
And that's the numbers we want to stack, because that's the best asset we all have, is being better versions of ourselves, right? That's the number one asset that we have. And we're always looking at the lagging numbers, right? We're looking at like, how many deals did I close? But it's not. It's the leading numbers of, the things you're trying to get better at. And the biggest leading number is, I always tell my reps, were you better today? Are you getting better today? Are you just a little bit better than yesterday? Because that's the number one asset. Because some people say, I did nothing today. It was just this and this problem, this, and like, think about how much better you got today. Think about the next time when that comes up. You're going to let it happen again? Well, no, I'm going to do this and this. I'm like, this is a good day. It's a really good day. So just, and it's hard to do that when you're in sales because everybody's looking at the lagging number. Everybody's looking at that big revenue number, but they never realize what it took to get there. And your effort when you start is always going to go unnoticed. It's, and you can't be looking for that. It's just for yourself if you're getting better.
What you say, a career in sales is so brutal, and I think being nice to, am I better today than I was yesterday? Am I better at the end of the day than I was at the beginning of the day? Then you won. That is, I mean, be kind to yourself. You're gonna, and honestly, that's the other thing. We think we should always be winning and not making mistakes. If you're winning all the time, you're not playing enough. If you're not making mistakes, you're not putting yourself out there. So get out there and lose some, make some mistakes, make a fool out of yourself. You're getting better. That just means you're playing at a higher level. It's good.
Man, those are some great closing thoughts. I feel like we should just end it right here.
Yeah, words of wisdom. We're done.
Yeah. Bob, do you have any final thoughts you want to throw in?
No, I actually kind of was going to sort of, I had that same thought that Neil and Anna just mentioned, winning is how we're measured, that we are in a revenue generation business. A lot of us report to Wall Street, very important things, right? But I think process is important. And I think that, Neil, I love how you talked about the lagging numbers. And I'll just tell, just maybe to close, just a very quick story from when I was selling. One year, I was number one in the country in 3M and selling industrial abrasives. And I knew, though, the number was great. But my biggest customer, who I should probably leave nameless, but it's a company you've heard of, tripled that. We already had all their share. We already had all their business, but they tripled their production. So I go on an incentive trip. I'm number one in the country, but really I know, I look myself in the mirror, the lagging number is great, but I'm going, okay, I did some good stuff this year, but there's no way that I would have been on this incentive trip or whatever if it wasn't for that customer tripling their production that year. And the following year, I still had a good year. I got a good rating, not as good. But that year, my second largest customer sent about 75%, 80% of their bicycle frames. I'll give you that little hint. They sent about 75, 80% of their production to China. And I kept all their business. Same story. I already had a lot. I had all their business before. I didn't lose any share, but they shipped 75, 80% of their production overseas. And so that was my best year that I've ever had, even though I had a lower production year. My numbers weren't as great. The lagging numbers weren't there, but the things I could control, I thought I crushed it that year. And I was so proud that year. And again, the year I was number one, again, I got all the accolades. Everyone loved it, but I knew what caused that number. So it's an interesting vibe. So process over results. I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean the takeaways I've heard tonight are great. Closing with confidence is about doing some of that upfront work. It's about learning from past mistakes. It's about not fearing no. I mean, we're going to hear it. If you're in sales and you can't handle rejection or hearing no, sometimes you're in the wrong profession. But if we're doing the right steps, closing is fun. Winning is fun, but you're not going to win all the time.
I love it. And on next month's episode, we'll help you set up your dating profile.
Yes, the Sales Hangover helps you in learning how to sell and date better.
We can use me as a guinea pig and set up my dating profile.
There you go. We'll help you out.
It'll be fun.
All right. Well, guys, this was a ton of fun as usual. Bob, thank you for joining us. Yeah, we'll see you next month, guys.